Enter the chat, the people-pleasing avoidant. Now, when most of people are thinking about avoidance, they do not think of people pleasers, but that's the thing with many avoidants. They come from this place of enmeshment. Hi, my name is Flora, and this is Redo Love. And join me to redo love together from the inside out. Here's what's fascinating about this particular type of avoidant from a psychological standpoint. These people typically had to do a lot of things early on. We're talking about like kids who had to take care of potentially like a drunk mom, a sick sibling, or basically became little adults way too soon. So they're naturally doers. They learn to be loved through doing. Oftentimes they're the older sibling, and through the act of helping, being helpful, taking care of things, that's how they received praise and love. Neuroscience tells us something really interesting here. When children's developing brains learn that love equals performance, their neural pathways literally wire for external validation. The prefrontal cortex, which handles decision making, becomes hypervigilant about others' needs while completely ignoring internal signals. The thing about these people that's really tricky is they're well-meaning, good people who are just trying to do what they know how to do to survive in the world like the rest of us, because they were somewhat raised right in the sense of do for others, take care of things, be helpful. They come off really great. But here's where the neuroscience gets really interesting. Their nervous system is literally wired for hypervigilance around others' emotional states. The mirror neuron system, which helps us empathize, is working overtime, while their interoceptive awareness, their ability to sense their own internal state, is practically non-existent. These types also tend to be yes people because they want you to be happy, because they don't want to have a problem, because they're wired to be hypervigilant about how you feel. Avoidants generally always don't like conflict. So because it's easier to say yes a lot of times than it is to say no and see the disappointment potentially on your face. So what's happening neurologically is that their amygdala, the brain's alarm system, fires off whenever there's potential conflict or disappointment. So saying yes becomes a protective mechanism to avoid triggering their own flight or freeze response. There's almost like this parroting thing that goes on, not exactly mirroring, which would be like more healthy communication, but they parrot. You'll say, I love this thing. And they're like, oh yeah, me too. But they may not even care at all. They're just going along in the conversation to kind of make it flow and make it easier. But there's always a vagueness around it. I said to somebody like this, I'm going to order food. What do you want? They said, I totally don't care. I said, okay, great. I ordered Indian food. They came. I said, I ordered Indian food. They're like, oh, I hate Indian food. And I was like, but you said you didn't care. And then they were like, no, it's fine. It's totally fine. And then they sat and ate the whole thing. Now, this is like a meaningless example. And at the time was like, totally didn't even clock that anything was going on. But now when I see everything else that happened, and in retrospect, I'm sitting here thinking, do they like Indian food or don't they like Indian food, right? Like I never really knew that. And there are several other examples of things like this where I'm circled back to thinking, wait, did they actually like that? Or was it me that liked it and they were just agreeing? So, from an attachment theory perspective, this is like part of their anxious system trying to create safety through sameness. Yes. Avoidants also get anxious. They just get internally anxious. And because they get so anxious that they go into freeze mode and they shut down. Authentic self got buried so deep under these survival mechanisms for trying to be the same that they genuinely don't know who they actually are or what they want or what they like. I'm not saying they don't have preferences. I'm not saying they completely don't exist, but I am saying all of that is buried in a very deep place that they are not used to accessing. This is why these particular people can be so dangerous because they seem amazing. Oftentimes my clients tell me that they never had a fight, that they dated for 2, 3 years and they didn't really have problems. They never they don't understand what happened. These people were going along and going along and going along until they couldn't anymore. The whole time, what's being missed is that while they're doing for you, they're planning, they're sending suggestions, they're being really good about considering your feelings, they are also really bad about considering their own. And they're really not even thinking about it until it gets so bad that they, explode, implode, or have to take a really big break. And here's the psychological trap, is that you're lulled into a sense of comfort thinking you're on the same page, because the whole time they're parroting you, you're on the same page. Your brain's reward system is getting hit with all the right chemicals: dopamine from feeling understood, oxytocin from feeling connected, but it's all based on a false premise. That's when the wall appears, or the wall appears when they're hitting their own boundary that they didn't maybe even know that they had, and they will only advocate for themselves when it's at the line of whatever limits they have. You don't even know there's a problem at all, because everything is being built to feed your ego and your comfort. You find that line somehow. Something happens, things come to a crossroads, and they're like, oh no, you can't come here. I walked you here. I drove the car. I bought the tickets. I booked the hotel. But no, 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 no. You can't actually come in. Did I mislead you by doing all those things? Oh no, 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 no. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to mislead you, but you can't come in. What's happening is that their avoidance system finally kicks in when intimacy gets too real. All that people pleasing was actually a defense mechanism to avoid truth, honesty, emotional intimacy, showing themselves, being themselves, while still getting their attachment needs met through usefulness. From an attachment theory perspective, what's brilliant and tragic about this pattern is that it allows them to get close enough to feel connected and valued, but not so close that they have to risk genuine vulnerability. The people pleasing creates what psychologists call pseudo intimacy. It feels intimate because they're so attuned to your needs and you feel special and cared for, but it's actually a carefully constructed barrier. The neuroscience here is also fascinating. Their attachment system is getting activated enough to release bonding hormones like oxytocin when they're being helpful and appreciated, but their nervous system never has to deal with the terror of being truly seen for who they are, because they don't even know who they are underneath all that performing. It's like they found the perfect loophole. They get to feel needed and connected without ever having to face the core avoidant wound, which is usually, if you really knew me, you'd leave. So instead, they show you this incredibly helpful, agreeable version that's impossible to reject. And that's why the wall appears so suddenly and feels so jarring. Once you start wanting the real them, not just their service to you, their system goes into full avoidant lockdown, because now you're asking for the one thing they absolutely cannot give: authentic honesty and emotional intimacy. All that people pleasing was never about getting closer to you. It was about staying safe while feeling connected. It's avoidance masquerading as connection, which makes it so much more confusing and painful for everyone involved. Then you realize the whole time you don't even know